The big news that has come from Trump land today has huge ramifications for India. The US president has announced that his country will impose 25% tariffs on goods imported from India starting the 1st of August. And that's not all. Trump has also stated that India will face an unspecified penalty for doing business with Russia. In a harsh statement posted on his social media platform, Truth Social, Trump said, and I quote, "While India is our friend, we have over the years done relatively little business with them because their tariffs are far too high, amongst the highest in the world, and they have the most strenuous and obnoxious non-monetary trade barriers of any country." Trump then goes on to say, India has always bought a vast majority of their military equipment from Russia and is Russia's largest buyer of energy, along with China at a time when everyone wants Russia to stop the killing in Ukraine. All things not good. India will therefore be paying a tariff of 25% plus a penalty for the above starting the 1st of August. With the 1st August deadline now just hours away, India faces a major challenge in its trade relationship with the United States. Trump had repeatedly warned that Indian goods could face tariffs up to 25% unless a new trade agreement was reached. He told reporters on his way back from the UK just yesterday, India has been a good friend, but India has charged basically more tariffs than any other country. The punishing tariffs follow months of negotiations. India has so far resisted offering significant new concessions, but indicated that it might have to accept higher tariffs in the short term. Indian officials have said in the past that talks on a mini trade deal with the United States have gone through 5 rounds, with another round planned for mid-August when a US delegation arrives. Now, bilateral trade in goods between the two countries reached about $130 billion in 2024, with India running a surplus of about $45 billion. That surplus is largely driven by exports of pharmaceuticals, auto companies, gemstones, and electrical goods. For months now, Trump has criticized what he views as unfair trade practices by India. Earlier this year, he introduced a world tariff framework, a broad levy of 10 to 15% on imports from countries with whom the United States did not have bilateral trade deals. He warned that these tariffs could climb further if negotiations dragged. Trump had already raised tariffs in several areas, including a global 25% duty on auto parts. When Prime Minister Narendra Modi travelled to Washington shortly after Trump's inauguration in his second term earlier this year, expectations were high for a fast-moving deal. However, 6 months, or shall we say 7 months later, negotiations have stalled. India has consistently protected its agriculture and dairy sectors, rejecting US demands to allow imports of genetically modified soybeans and corn, or to open the domestic dairy market to large-scale American producers. New Delhi has also pushed back on non-tariff barriers and is working on incremental tariff reduction in certain sectors, but those efforts have not been enough to avert the tariff threat. Behind the scenes, Indian negotiators have reportedly proposed quota-based systems for sensitive imports like those used in a recent UK trade agreement that would gradually expand market access over several years. All right, let's go straight across to our guest who joins us from Washington, D.C. tonight. We have with us on Global Lens, Global Pulse, Raymond Vickery, former United States Assistant Secretary of Commerce for Trade Development. Mr. Vickery is currently Senior Associate at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Raymond Vickery, great to have you back on Global Pulse. You know, Donald Trump keeps referring to India as a friend and yet goes ahead and slaps a 25% tariff on imports from India, and in addition has announced an unspecified penalty, in his words, on India for doing business with Russia. The question many would ask is, with friends like these, who needs enemies? Your thoughts?
Well, thanks very much for having me. I think that this is a very unfortunate development. These two great democracies, India and the US, have so much in common, whether it be in strategic matters, economic matters, people to people. You see Indian Americans leading in American life in many, many fields. So these two great democracies have to cooperate to solve any overarching problem, whether it be climate change or strategic. That having been said, it is apparent that President Trump has jettisoned the entire system, which has served the United States and the world so well since World War II. This bilateral transactional approach, that of a real estate developer, has destroyed the World Trade Organization, the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, indeed, the whole multilateral system. These things are very unfortunate developments. I think that the question of friendship really is out the window. It's a transactional situation of what's in it for me at this time from the American president's perspective. That having been said, the reality is what it is. And it's time now for India to assess what is in its own interest rather than say that you can just go it alone and don't need any other connections. I think values are very, very important here. And I believe underlying, regardless of who's in power in the United States or India, democratic values are very important. The importance of non-invasion of your neighbors is important. So India has to, one, look at its own economic interest. And it is true that India has had, since independence, a protectionist view of its own industry. This was justified in the first instance when India was weak, and that is no longer the case. And so there are many, many ways in which you can open up without touching things like milk, agriculture, and so forth. On the other hand, India has to assess what's in its own interest, it seems to me, in terms of Russia. For many, many years, the idea has been that whatever Russia did in terms of its own internal system of authoritarianism or invading its neighbors was not really particularly the interest of India. India needs to be able to look at its own democratic values and its leadership position in the world. The United States President Donald Trump has created a vacuum in leadership for democratic values. I would suggest that this ought to be looked at as an opportunity as well as a detriment, a time for India to step forward and provide leadership, not just in protection of its own borders, but in the world, whether it be in security or economic. So this is an unfortunate development. It is the Donald Trump way, and it seems to me that saner heads on both the Indian and U.S. side have to get together to be able to work our way out of this problem.
Well, you've made some very important points. Interestingly, you also say that Donald Trump has created a leadership vacuum in the world. We all have known all along about Donald Trump being a very transactional man. But yes, I think today it would be safe to say that he has undermined the friendship between India and the United States, the world's largest and oldest democracies, even as he continues to refer to India as a friend. And, you know, talking about the punitive measures that he's announced, the secondary tariffs, as it were, because of India's business with Russia, especially purchase of oil. You know, our external affairs minister has been on record as having said that the world needs to share its double standards on this issue. What India buys in a quarter from Russia in terms of energy is what Europe buys in an afternoon. But clearly none of that has worked. and Donald Trump has decided India needs to be punished for this. Let me ask you this, Raymond Vickery. You know, when our Prime Minister visited the White House soon after Donald Trump's inauguration this year, expectations were very high that India and the United States would be able to conclude a trade deal. But 6 months down the road, that deal continues to elude us. Do you believe these punitive tariffs, which in some ways have sent shockwaves across India today, could, in a sense, give a fillip to the negotiations that are ongoing as far as this mini India-US trade deal is concerned? 5 rounds have already taken place, and the next round, we are told, is scheduled for mid-August, when a delegation from the US is expected to arrive in New Delhi.
Well, I think certainly that you have to look at everything that President Trump does and take it with a grain of salt. His approach is to make an extravagant demand, which creates chaos. He creates the problem, and then the problem which he created, he ameliorates and backs off from. You know, Wall Street has for some months been calling him Taco. Trump always chickens out. He doesn't necessarily chicken out, but he does back off. So he wants to negotiate. He wants to show that he is the winner in the situation. So that has to happen. On the question of Russian oil, it seems to me that India needs to look at what its interests are vis-a-vis imperialism, the invasion of neighbors, the sanctity of borders, which are enshrined in the United Nations Charter. And then it needs to act accordingly. There's not a lack of oil in the world. The question is, from whom do you buy it and at what price? And India has taken advantage of Russia's need for currency, for wherewithal in order to be able to conduct its invasion. I don't think that India believes that that's in its interest. So there is an area, it seems to me, in which India can show leadership in terms of getting Russia to abide by rule of law and what has been enshrined in the UN Charter. But it is an unfortunate situation, and it's going to require saner heads on both sides, India and the US, to work our way through the problem. But we've been able to do this in the past. I, of course, worked very hard in regard to sanctions on nuclear tests, and I remember what the dark days those were. And we've worked our way through it. So what has to be happening is a concentration not on the immediate, but on values. And I agree that what we ought to be working for in regard to trade is something like a fair trade, a free trade agreement. India has shown its ability to agree with UK, with others, and we can do that. But it shouldn't be done the way Donald Trump is going forward. But those are the prevailing conditions, and we must deal with that reality.
It should not be done at gunpoint, for sure. And just for some perspective, India's stand has been that it has historically significant ties with Russia, a friendship that has stood the test of time. That's not something it's willing to compromise on for the sake of any other country, and that it will place its own national interests above every other consideration. And if it is in the interest of the Indian people to buy cheap oil from Russia, well, then New Delhi will continue to exercise that option. But having said that, final question to you, Raymond Vickery. Do you believe, now that we find ourselves in this situation, do you believe that a trade deal between India and the United States, which is in the works currently, is the answer to this imbroglio that has been created by the Trump tariffs? And even if that is the case, do you expect him to do away with the punitive tariffs, the secondary tariffs that he has announced? Also, very quickly, as we wrap up this conversation, do you believe that with his tariff wars, Donald Trump is single-handedly triggering the collapse of the World Trade Organization?
Well, he certainly is in regard to the WTO. It's not being utilized. The whole principles there are out. But I do believe that there is room here for further negotiation. You know, when we first started, when Prime Minister Modi came to Washington in January, the idea was we were going to reach some sort of agreement in the fall. Well, it's not yet the fall. And we made progress in the first Trump administration in terms of getting to a freer trade agreement. So I think that those things can be done. But I do think that India is going to have to assess its relationship with Russia. To call it friendship, it seems to me, is not exactly correct. It has been cheaper oil, not cheap as such, but cheaper at a lower price. You're still paying quite a bit. And arms, which come without any constraints on them. Is India really in line with the Russian approach to the world? India has been a leading anti-imperialist. You can't see the invasion of Ukraine by Russia and its designs on Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union as anything but recreation of the old Russian Empire. So India's values should come into play here. Nobody is saying that you cut off all relationships, but there needs to be a reassessment, and there need to be saner heads, as I've said, on both sides.
Saner heads need to prevail on both sides, and now the big question is, how is New Delhi going to respond to these tariffs? On that note, Raymond Vickery, thank you so much for joining me on Global Pulse tonight.
Thank you.
Before we move on, let's listen in to what Donald Trump said just yesterday aboard the Air Force One. While talking to reporters about tariffs, this is what Trump said in the context of India.
I saw a report from Reuters that India is preparing to face higher U.S. tariffs between 20 and 25%. Is that what you're tracking, or what do you think the rate will be for India?
That they are going to pay 25%.
That India is preparing to face higher U.S. tariffs between 20 and 25%.
Yeah, I think so. Look, they're my friends, and he's my friend. And, you know, they ended the war with Pakistan at my request, and that was great. And Pakistan did also. You know, we did a lot of great settlements, including the recent one, as you know, with Cambodia, blah, blah, blah.